You're listening to the Mailbox Money Podcast with Cody Burton
and Rebecca Scott. So you used to live in Florida.
I did.
Where in Florida again? What
In
part?
Jacksonville. So Northeast Florida, might as well be Georgia.
Yeah. Actually, Jacksonville is one of the very first places that my husband and I, before, like when we were just dating, we ever went to by ourselves, like on our own vacation. And we had...
Intentionally?
Yes.
Why?
We were living in Tennessee at the time. And so it was just like one of the closest beaches that was affordable that we could drive to.
Makes sense. I mean, Jacksonville is the first coast.
Yeah.
It's the first coast you hit when you get into Florida.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it makes sense.
Yeah. So we had the absolute best time in the entire world. Like to this day, we have this weird love relationship with Jacksonville.
Oh, well, good.
Yeah, we love it. We had his mom Venmo'd us like $100 and was like, dinner on me. And we're like, $100 for dinner? Oh my gosh. We thought that was just the most amount of money ever.
Well, and the funny thing in Jacksonville, that'll get you a pretty decent dinner.
Oh, we were eating king crab legs. I mean, we were living our best life. Absolutely. We probably looked like absolute buffoons, sunburned as always, and just, I don't know. I'm sure we were in our swimsuit cover-ups and in a nice restaurant. Just like...
Yep. That is how you peg the tourist in Florida easily.
For sure.
All the tourists are sunburned. Everybody else is not.
For sure. And we didn't even get a full Airbnb because we couldn't afford that. We just got like one room, like a shared room situation, which good on these people. They owned a condo and then rented one of the rooms out. Technically house hacked. Airbnb'd it and said that they haven't paid a mortgage. Like the Airbnb had covered their mortgage for months.
That's nice.
Yeah.
You know, we should probably mention that in our house hacking episode because that's
Totally.
not something we talk about as
No.
Airbnb rooms.
No,
that's a great idea.
I know. Especially if you have a walkout basement and just Airbnb the basement, then they have a completely separate entrance. I'm selling a house. I close on a house on Thursday, and that's what they're doing. They have a walkout basement, and they can have an alley access, and so they can pull in, their guests can pull in to their pad, and it's like a covered patio situation.
And even separate parking?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, so covered parking, and then they walk right up, and they can go in, and, you know, they don't have a kitchen, so they have to put they'll put a bar situation down there and whatnot, just with like a toaster oven and microwave or something of the sorts, you know, mini fridge, whatever, and then they're just going to rent it out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, really, especially for, you know, if they're doing long-term rental, that's fine. But, like, for Airbnb, you don't need a kitchen.
No.
I mean, people visiting the city, they're going to want to go out. They're going to, like...
Especially if you're in Denver.
Yeah. Throw
right?
a refrigerator in there for
Yeah.
people to, like, bring back leftovers. That's all you need.
The other interesting part of it is I was telling you that I went to that listing appointment today for a 1-bedroom, 1-bath, super nice condo right across or not even across the street, like basically attached to Union Station.
Yep.
And they can't get renters in there. It's so nice as well.
Really?
They're doing short term and they're just really, really struggling.
Really? Why do you think that is?
1 bedroom.
Yeah, I guess it's true.
That's the thing with, and I assume that this is a spendy unit, and so I gotta think that they're probably charging too much money, and it's only 1 bedroom. You can't really split it, you know? So I gotta think that it's just that's why with Airbnb, you don't want 1-bedroom condos.
Especially luxury 1-bedroom.
Right.
Luxury 1-bedroom is definitely a hard sell for Airbnb.
You have to do corporate rentals at that point.
Yeah.
And that's the only time it makes sense. It's perfect corporate rental. But with 2020 and all that, the market's not been there.
Yeah.
And they don't have parking. Anyway, okay, so back to Jacksonville.
Yep.
How old were you when you bought your first property, and how did you do it?
So I got into investing when I met my partner, Michael. We met 2000... Can't mess this up because it's recorded.
He will know.
Yeah.
He will be listening.
Have to do the math. It'd be 2014, I think.
Gross,
Yeah.
You're old. Y'all have been together longer than I realized.
Yeah, we're coming up on 8 years.
Yeah, wow. Okay.
So, yeah, 2014. At the time, he had a single family that he was renting out to a friend of his. And then he had just closed on a 4-unit building. I think literally weeks, maybe a month before we started dating.
Okay.
Really terrible shape. I mean, this place, this place was an absolute shithole.
Mm-hmm.
And lots of deferred maintenance. The previous owner had let it go. It was a 2-story building, so 2 units on the bottom floor, 2 units on the upper floor. Very typical quad.
Mm-hmm.
It had a 2-story deck on the back of it. So, like, you walked out from the 2 back units, and it was kind of a shared balcony on the lower unit and the upper unit.
Yep.
It was literally detaching and falling away from the building.
Excellent.
That tells you what sort of shape this place had
and
been
insurance
kept
just
in.
still gave you the thumbs up.
How? I have no idea. But yeah, they sure buy that. It's falling into 2 pieces. No big deal.
We won't cover it.
So that was kind of my introduction to investments, was not so much buying it, but being kind of like brought along this journey. And then because I grew up, around property, my stepdad had like a handyman business. I grew up doing a lot of those fixes with him, going on jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So because I was really handy, I tended to get thrown into the projects.
Which is super helpful.
Yeah, very helpful. And part of it was, my own fault looking back. We'd get bids back from contractors and they'd be, several $1,000s. I'd be like, I can do that for $800 on my day off. Like, you're not paying this money.
Yeah.
Just let me do it.
Yep.
And, especially new relationship, you want to be helpful. You want to, like,
we're so supportive.
impress the other person. So it's like, oh, look how
show him
handy
your
I
muscles. Oh no, I have to do this without a shirt on. Michael, don't watch me. I'm so embarrassed.
So that's kind of how I got into it, was just fixing up this rental. And at the time, if I'm honest, I was very against rentals. This experience actually turned me off from long-term rentals and was like, this is why you do a flip, because this is never-ending work.
Yeah.
This is going to go on forever.
Yeah.
But then we got through the stabilization period, kind of saw it come together, and a couple years down the road, we'd bought one more at that time for a total of 6 units at that point. And then it came time to relocate.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't really want to manage properties from afar.
And did Michael's job move to Denver? Is that what happened?
Sort of. So his
Okay.
company got bought. He was in mortgage.
Right.
His company got bought. They were shutting down their Florida offices.
Okay.
And to stay with that company, we had the option to move to Buffalo, New York,
Okay.
or New Jersey. And I said absolutely not.
I think out of the two, I might have. Ah, man, that's a hard one. I actually don't know. I've never been to Buffalo. I have been to Jersey.
Buffalo is so cold.
It's just so incredibly cold.
So cold, so
Yeah.
much snow.
Yeah.
Michael, you know this. Michael's from New York originally,
Yeah, yeah.
upstate New York.
Right.
He didn't really want to go back to New York.
Fair.
I kind of had a line of like the middle of the country, being, Florida beach boy. I wasn't crossing. So that was like, if we want to stay together and make this work, we need one of these states. He had loved Colorado. I'm super outdoorsy. I'd never been to Colorado, always wanted to go. It sounds stupid, but like every single one of those like online, like choose the state best for you or whatever. Literally from the time I was a kid, every single one had said Colorado.
That's
so
so
it
funny.
was an interesting opportunity.
Yeah.
We came out here in a week. I was like, yep, I love it. It's not as cold as I thought. I'm down.
People don't know that Denver's actually not very cold.
Just kidding. It's super
It's
cold.
so cold.
Don't come here.
Yeah, I know. No kidding. Californians, you stick to where you're at. Just kidding.
So yeah, that's
More serious about the Texans. Just kidding.
But yeah,
Yeah, Californians, you're welcome. Texans, you're not welcome.
what is that? What's that joke? Like kidding but not kidding.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how that came about. We settled on Colorado. Both were able to land pretty decent jobs out here. We didn't want to manage from afar. At the time, we did have a property management company, but they were not great. It was one of those, like, they answered the phone when a tenant called at 2 a.m. with a leaky toilet, and then at 8 a.m. they called you.
While the toilet was still leaking the entire time, or would they send somebody out there?
No, they it was almost like they were just an answering service.
Oh,
like,
interesting.
So the tenants didn't have your number, and they handled the leasing paperwork, and that was about it.
So then would you then be responsible to call a plumber and have somebody go out there? Or would they call a plumber?
They'd be like, hey, the toilet's leaking, what do you want to do? And it's like, obviously, we want to fix it.
Sure.
And they were like, well, here's a few of the plumbers we've had before that have done it. Like, do you want me to call them, or do you want to call? Like, it was very weird.
They were adding no value, essentially.
Only that people weren't calling us in the middle of the night. That was like the only value. And granted, they were super cheap. I think they charged like 5%.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so like it was a trade-off. Like we knew we could get a more full service property management company. But with the move and, it just made more sense to sell it and start over.
And so sorry to interrupt, were you cash flowing at the time from those properties? Like how much roughly, if you remember correctly?
God, at this point, I wouldn't even remember. The 4-unit, I don't know that we ever truly cash flowed on it because I think
just with repairs,
every bit we made just went into repairs. And they were little, like, 1-bed, 1-bath units. If I remember right, when we sold it, they were renting for $680.
And how much did you buy, or how much did Michael buy the property for?
So that was the saving grace on this place. It was less than $100,000.
Wow.
And it's because, we dumped another $100,000 into it because it was in such rough shape.
Yeah.
But if I remember right, the closing price was like $84,000.
Okay.
And then we immediately dumped $100,000 into it, and got very fortunate when we sold it. We sold it for just over $300,000.
And I'm sorry, you said you were making how much on each unit?
When we sold the place, I'm pretty sure the leases were $680.
$680.
Yeah, but that wasn't true the whole time. When we bought it, the leases were like $400 something because it was in such rough shape.
So you would be bringing in roughly $2,700 from the 4 units, and your mortgage on an $84,000 property is like what?
It was
$25.
Basically nothing.
I mean, a couple $100, right?
Yeah.
So in theory, that's good. But again, if you're dumping every penny into it, then, after a while, it doesn't make sense. Right?
Yep.
Unless you hold on to it long enough. And obviously you did hold on to it long enough for it to appreciate and you to make some money on it. Right?
Yep. Yeah, we had it for a few years. We were very fortunate because the area we were in, all of our properties, including where we were living, was a very up-and-coming area. And it finally kind of up and came while we were trying to move. So we ended up making a decent bit of money on that place. We made a decent bit of money on our place. And then the other places we had were also in that same area. So we did pretty well. So you had a primary
as well together. And so how long did you guys own that?
So Michael owned that one when we met.
Okay.
I think he had lived there just over a year. So when we sold, he had had that for 4 years, I think.
Okay. So you guys just lived in that. So you had a primary, a quad, and a duplex?
Yep.
Got it. And so tell me about the duplex. So you obviously had the quad for 84, making...
Sorry, not a duplex, another single family.
Oh, another single family.
Yep.
Gotcha. Oh, so 6 total.
Yep.
6 doors total. Okay. So the single family, how much did you purchase that for?
So the single family, you've heard me tell this story on our podcast. It was $24,000 at an auction. You couldn't go inside. It was rough. Like, I know home prices have gone up. $24,000 sounds crazy now.
Also makes you sound like you're 100 years old.
This was not that long ago.
Cody may or may not be a boomer.
But it was, like I said, it was in a really up-and-coming part of town. It was an area that had a reputation for being up-and-coming for the last 25 years, so nobody thought it was ever actually going to do it. And it was rough. And it was one of those places that a flipper had bought, and halfway through it, they'd gone bankrupt, which is why it was being auctioned. And we won it, We actually did really well. We won that auction by $100.
Wow, that's incredible.
Found that out later. That was nice to know. Super knew we didn't overpay for it.
So in the auction process, when you go there, is it just like it is here where you, I mean, essentially, because auctions are different, right? And I mean, the auctions here, you essentially just like raise your hand, like 24,000, you know, I mean, very standard, but then sometimes you have to do it almost like a silent auction situation where you submit offers silently. So what was that process like?
So I wish this one was that exciting.
Okay.
This one, it was an online portal. You went online, Monday at 8 a.m., I think it was.
Yeah.
And it was open until Wednesday at 8 a.m. I think it was 48 hours, if I remember right.
Yeah.
And it did not tell you how many other bids there were.
Yeah.
It didn't tell you what the current bid was.
Okay. Really? It didn't?
No.
Because this is how they do it in Kansas, and but they tell you what the other bid is.
No. So this one, it gave you an opening bid.
Okay.
And that's all it told you.
Wow.
No other bids, no winning bid.
Okay.
And you also didn't, like, put in a bid with, like, an escalation of, like,
sure.
and it, goes up by any sort of increment.
Yeah.
You just put in your bid, and it was basically less like an auction and more in, like, throw in a pool and we'll pick the winner.
Yeah, interesting. Okay.
So, really weird. I haven't come across that again.
Right.
But that's how they did it.
Huh.
So, yeah, we won it by $100. Very exciting.
Absolutely.
Walked in the front door. There's no floor. It's an off-grade house. You can look down, you see the joist, and then there's the dirt.
Excellent.
So.
Hope the roof was good.
So that was a process.
Yeah.
And that was one we had kind of intended it to be a flip.
Okay.
And just with having to put in an entire floor, the numbers didn't make sense anymore. So it became a long-term rental.
And at this point, were you telling Michael, we should not invest in real estate? This is so silly. Or when did you start seeing the value in it?
Yeah. So I was never fully out the door. I was never like, we shouldn't do real estate.
Okay.
We had several conversations of why are we not just flipping? Like that one became a buy and hold because it had to, because we just needed to make our money back.
Sure.
But Michael was very set, like, we need to grow our portfolio, we need to buy more holds. And I'm like, you were dumping all this money into it, especially because, I did believe that area was going to come up. I was like, let's buy a place, fix it up, and then sell it off, and then we'll make money, and then we can buy a bigger place and do it again.
Right.
And I think, with age comes wisdom. And my perspective then was building income, not building wealth.
Right.
And I think that's the real difference. If you could go back and, like, talk to your younger self, I don't think I had any concept that those two were different things.
Absolutely. And especially I don't know, did you grow up with money or parents who taught you how to use money? Because I did not, right? So I saw people who would buy real estate, but I didn't know what that meant. I thought it was rich people bragging, where it's like, I'm so rich, I have another home. Seriously. I mean, that was what it was when I was growing up.
Yeah.
And I didn't have people in my life to tell me, no, this is investing. It's much different. And you should learn how to do it, or this is how you make money, or this is how you build wealth. This is how you change the trajectory of your life. Or my husband and I call it the step change. So every family, not every family, but a lot of families, they have a step change where they grew up poor, and then there was one generation who decided they learned how to make money, and then every generation after that had money, right?
Yep.
There's that step change, and I am that for my family. So I didn't know if you had family to, like, teach you, hey, this is building wealth, you're investing, or is that more Michael who kind of taught you how to do that?
Definitely more Michael. So I grew up solidly middle class. We weren't poor, but we didn't have lots of extra money. And with my family, my mom, she was kind of the sort of that step change. My grandparents didn't have a ton, especially when my mom was growing up. It was very kind of basics.
Sure.
And my mom landed a good job at UPS, so we were, fairly comfortable. Like I said, solidly middle class, but she never had anybody to teach her about investing or what to do with money.
Mm-hmm.
And with UPS, she got that job in college, only job she'd ever had, working towards a pension, all that sort of stuff. There wasn't this need to be savvy and invest,
Right.
because it was just already taken care of.
That was my mom. I mean, she hasn't cashed out because she's being stubborn. She has a pension. That's her only investment or means of retirement.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it.
And so, yeah, it wasn't anything that was ever discussed around my house. Money wasn't really something that we ever talked about.
Right. Same, because it's tacky. And I'm winking as I say that because it's not tacky. It's actually super important. It's crucial to talk to kids, your peers, people above you. It's super, super important to talk about money with
we have a whole
peers.
podcast talking about it.
Absolutely. So important, especially for you ladies out there. Anyway, okay, so you decided you've bought into real estate.
Yep.
You held on to this property to make some money, and then all of a sudden, you guys are uprooting your lives, and you're moving to Colorado.
Yep, uprooting, moving to Colorado. We decided we needed to sell the properties because we didn't want to manage from afar.
Did you do that before or after you left Florida?
So the initial one, the one with no floor, that one we sold before we moved.
Okay. Did you put a floor in it?
Yes, we had long put a floor in it. A friend of ours had been living there, took great care of the property. It was actually super cute.
Good.
We actually had talked about it a couple times that if she ever moved out of that place, we would move into it and rent our place because it was smaller, but it was cuter.
Yeah.
Stained glass, 1920s house, adorable.
Lovely.
So yeah, we sold that one beforehand. The quad we had under contract by the time it came up to move, but it wasn't sold yet.
Okay.
And then our house, same sort of thing. We had it under contract, hadn't sold when we moved, but sold shortly after.
Okay.
Unfortunately, we did not know about 1031ing, so we had a huge tax bill. And if you don't know what that is either, we have an episode coming soon about it.
Yeah.
So stay tuned.
Yeah.
But yeah, so paid a huge tax bill, moved out here, immediately started to look to reinvest. By this time, and that was actually, our move was really what sold me on buy and hold because of how much money we made just by holding those properties for a few years.
Yeah.
We made way more than we ever could have in a flip, and we had rental income the whole time. The quad had paid for a lot of the repairs,
Yeah.
not the major ones, but the minor ones.
Sure.
And we'd cash flowed on the other two the whole time and made a pretty good lump sum when we sold it.
It's great.
And that wouldn't have been possible if we had just flipped it in 6 months. So it was actually going through the process that actually made me a convert. Like I had to do it and see it worked to be like, oh, this is way better than flipping. This is what we need to be doing.
And that is so important. What you just said is going through the process is completely different than advising people to go through the process.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I'm not embarrassed to say because this is how it was, but I was advising people to buy a house, and yeah, it was just retail, so it wasn't end all be all, but I was helping people buy a house while still renting. I never bought a house before, and so when we bought our first house, I was like, this is so different. Mm-hmm. It's so important to ask your realtor questions like, how many doors do you own? How many houses? Have you done it yourself? Because I know realtors that we work with that they have never bought a house before.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean, I see it way more often than I would like to admit. And that's one of the things that is always a huge red flag personally. So you're completely right. Once you go through the process, you learn a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I am pretty proud of the fact that I have never helped a client do something that I haven't done first.
It's incredible.
Which not many people can say.
I absolutely agree.
So, yeah, I like to, especially talking to investors.
Yeah.
I kind of like to open with that. Like, I never sold a duplex before I owned a duplex. I never sold a commercial property before I had personally bought a commercial property.
And there's nothing that's going to happen to you that I haven't done already.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of power in that sentence alone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so then you moved out here.
Yep.
Bought a property.
Moved out here. We rented for a year, kind of learned the area. bought our primary house. Once we had that settled.
Same one that you live in now?
Yep, same one we live in now. That was
Nice.
our first house in Denver. Loved that house.
Yeah.
So once we got that kind of settled, then we turned our eye towards investment and, tried to find some deals, tried to figure it out. So much doing it on your own. Even after having owned, a handful of places at that point, you get performance from people. They're missing HOA, taxes are wrong.
Yeah.
It's just kind of a mess. You have people, this is a 10 cap, this is a 12 cap. And even with our limited knowledge then, I'm like, no, it's not. And so
it sounds great on paper, but then you see it on paper and you're like, there's absolutely no way.
Yeah.
You're accounting for half of my expenses.
Right.
Yeah.
Or they don't have property management on there. They don't, just all sorts of things.
Yeah.
So we got a little discouraged with it. Not a lot. We were always moving forward. Then Michael met Jen Reinhardt, who, coworker of ours, how I ended up at Atlas. And she would not mind me telling this story. It's quite funny. Michael is a lender with KeyBank, had a client. Jen was their agent and buying a duplex here in Denver, if I remember right. And Jen would not send him the contract. Just wouldn't do it. And, she called and tried to talk this client into using somebody else and called Michael, you don't know what an assignable contract is. Like, we do things a little differently. Like, this just isn't going to work. I needed you to tell the client this isn't going to work. And he wouldn't do it. And so, I
did not know this story.
You didn't know the story?
No, I've never heard this. This is amazing.
Oh, this is a fun story.
This is cracking me up.
So it's one of those things. It was two kind of stubborn people.
Yeah, for sure.
Butting heads. And eventually Jen sent him the contract and Michael handled the deal really well. And through that, then Jen, somehow they got onto the line that, we had been investors. We were looking to invest again. And yeah, the rest is history. We worked with Jen to buy a few properties. That's how we placed the money that we got in Florida. And then we've grown our portfolio ever since.
That's hilarious. I did not know that. The first time I met Michael was when we were doing yoga up in the attic in our old office.
Okay. So you met him after the steam had blown over.
Yes, exactly. I only heard wonderful things about Michael. And I was like, awesome. Like, that sounds great, But I was using somebody else at the time. And I wasn't that into investment stuff quite yet because I was just kind of getting my feet underneath me. Yeah, so that's funny.
Yeah, that is funny. But yeah, it did not start all sunshine and roses, even though, they love each other now. And
totally.
We have Jen over for dinner and whatever.
Absolutely. That's great. So going through this process, what's kind of looking back, if you were to tell the younger self one bit of advice, what would you tell your younger self?
One thing is difficult. I think my initial bit of advice would just be do it.
Jump on in, the water's warm.
Yeah, and I think there was a bit of that too of is a flip better? Is a buy and hold better? The answer is yes. Buy and hold. That's better. Sure. But just do it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what I would really tell myself of just get started.
Yeah.
And I would also explain to myself what house hacking was. Because, oh my God, had I known what that was at 21.
I know.
It'd be
different.
Completely different.
Yep.
I wish I had known what house hacking was. And I wish I had known what a 1031 is. Yep. And, we've grown our portfolio. I'm very happy with how it's performing. But to get those initial 4 years back and be able to snowball that, we'd be in a totally different place.
The first 3 to 5 years are probably the hardest.
Absolutely.
Especially when you're in an expensive market, as we are. Florida is a great place to start because you can actually get into something for, $24,000, right? Denver's not that way. And so it is interesting. The first couple years is so hard. A lot of people, that's when they lose their steam. And that's when this isn't working. It's just stay consistent, stay on the course that we have planned. And I promise you it'll work out. Once you kind of get past that 5-year mark,
That's when you really start seeing things snowball. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I was really fortunate to see that pay off a lot quicker than most people because, like I said, the area we were in, we got very, very lucky that what people had been saying was up and coming for 25 years actually started to explode just right about the time we moved.
Yeah.
And so seeing that early victory just catapulted both of us, I think, to be like, yeah, this is the right course.
So kind of going back, when you left Florida, how much money did you actually walk away with all of your properties? How much money did you have that you, one, could have 1031 but did not? How much were you able to place here in the Denver area?
You know, at this point...
And it can be ballpark.
Yeah, it'd have to be ballpark. I don't really remember. But I think probably 400,000-ish.
So you walked away after 3 to 4 years of starting investing in Florida, right? Walked away with 400 grand and then started buying places here in Colorado.
Yep.
And then did you buy like 4 different either quads, duplexes, or whatever it was, plus a single family?
Yeah, so we bought our single family first, and then from there we really focused in on quads just because that's the largest you can get with traditional financing.
Of course.
So we really focused in on quads. We bought one in Brighton. We bought one out in Aurora. Those are our first 2, and I don't remember which one was the third one.
Sure.
So we did that, and then the other thing we did, which we actually learned from Jen that we didn't know about, because Michael left his company, he had quite a bit in a 401k there. He rolled it over into an IRA, like you do when you leave a company.
Yep.
And we actually bought 2 properties in the IRA as well.
Nice.
Both in Colorado.
Okay.
So that was a really nice start to our portfolio because we had that money, sitting there ready to go.
So then once you kind of deployed all of that capital, how long did it take you after that to continue to buy? Were you, because Michael, and I mean, you are too, but Michael's a high income earner. Was he constantly just saving enough money quickly enough to continue to buy, or did you start, HELOCing it out and refinancing at that time?
Yeah, no, like the joke we say, any true investor, they buy as soon as they have the money.
Yep.
And that's what we did. We basically were off to the races. As soon as we had enough money to buy another place, we were buying another place.
Yeah.
And so, we've we live a nice lifestyle, but we do what we can to keep our expenses low. We're not driving around. I mean, neither of us have a Mercedes.
Right.
And so, yeah, we try to sneak away as much money as we can. And as soon as we have enough for another one, we buy another one.
So have you started HELOCing and refinancing properties to pull cash out on any of them, or are you not playing that game yet?
Not yet. So all of those first places, we've just continued to grow our portfolio by saving up and doing the down payment that way. We have done a line now that is against our portfolio, like a business line, because we have everything in an LLC now.
Yep.
And we've used that a couple times to buy places when deals have come up that have just been too good to say no to, when we haven't necessarily had the money. And like a HELOC, it's a great way to do that because you have the money sitting ready. When a deal presents itself that you can't say no to, you don't have to say no because it's not like, oh, well, we're 6 months out from having enough for it. You've got that sitting there.
Right.
So that's kind of what we've done. We've leveraged against our portfolio as a whole.
Excellent. So then you're investing in all these deals, you and Michael both. You're not working at Atlas yet at the time.
No, not yet.
So how long did it take you? How long did you live in Denver before you started working at Atlas?
So just about 2 years.
Okay.
So we moved to Denver. I was working for an events company doing festivals, things like that. Really enjoyed it. I had moved up to be their director of operations, kind of handling basically all of the moving pieces of the festival: stages, lighting, sound equipment, everything like that, all the way down to like how many dumpsters and portalettes we needed and what the electrical plans looked like for all of the stages.
Sure.
Great job. I absolutely loved it. Super exciting, super exhausting. most of the time at a festival, I would be working from 8 or 9 in the morning until 2 if I got to go to bed early.
Sounds awful.
There were nights that I was up until 4 and then back up at 8 because there was an issue at a stage and I needed to be.
I would cry. I don't do well with no sleep. I would get sick and I would cry.
So, really fun job. It was one of those things, like, you start to look in the mirror and think, like, I'm having a great time now.
Yeah.
When I'm in my late 20s.
Sure.
Can I do this even when I'm in my late 30s?
Yeah. So you worked that for a handful of years, and then Michael met Jen.
Mm-hmm.
You guys had a little love relationship after the first incident or transaction, as we will. And then what was the transition from you just being an investor to you actually being employed by Atlas?
Yeah. So, I kind of, like I said, I had that look in the mirror moment, and I was like, as much as I love this, I can't do this as my day-to-day for a career. It's just not sustainable.
Yeah.
And so I kind of started to think, like, okay, well, if I'm going to change careers, what would I want to change careers to? And I thought about a whole bunch of different options. I thought about starting my own business, just, running through all the ideas.
Of course.
And it kind of came into my lap. We were having dinner with a couple of Michael's top referring realtors. And they knew we were building portfolio. They knew we were buying frequently. And we're just kind of like, why don't you do real estate? Like, and it wasn't even like a suggestion. It was a legitimate, like, why aren't you already doing this? And it was one of those things. It's, sometimes when something's too close to your face, you can't see it.
Right.
And so it was a bit of a light bulb. And I was like, oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And I thought I could bring over a lot of the skills I had managing really complex things over to real estate and managing deals.
Sure.
So I went to get my license. I think one night we were having Jen over for dinner, and I told her I'd just started the thing. And I didn't have much of a choice to go anywhere else. She was like, oh my God, we're going to hire you. This is going to be great.
Yeah, she's a very persistent person. She doesn't take no for an answer.
So, and honestly, it made the most sense, right? Like,
yeah.
I don't know that it would have been really weird to end up somewhere else while we're also growing this portfolio with Atlas, having it managed by Atlas. I mean, at that point,
That's what I was going to ask. Was Atlas managing all of your properties at that time?
Yeah,
okay.
Atlas was managing all of our properties. At that point, we'd already bought in multiple states with Atlas.
Okay.
So it was one of those, Jen didn't give me another choice, but any other choice would have made no sense.
Right. You would have come to that conclusion yourself as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I started with Atlas and then, learned from managing my own deals, managing other people's deals, which...
How was the transition? Because most people go the opposite, where they learn how to do transactions for other people and then they start buying themselves. They see that it's too easy and that they're no different than anybody else and they should start buying their own properties as well. You kind of went backwards, where you...
It's the story of my life.
Yeah. Where you were transacting so often that then you became a real estate agent. And so what was it like going from that side?
Yeah, it was definitely interesting. People are different than me. And I think that was the realization I had doing this as a business of, like, things would come up in inspection. Because especially, like, we'd bought some really rough places. I already talked about that. Like, yeah. And so things would come up in inspection. I'd be like, oh, yeah, that's no big deal. Like, that's not a big deal to handle at all. And I would have, like, fairly seasoned investors I was working with that would just freak out. Like, we need to kill this deal. This is terrible. This is never going to make money. And it was nice having the experience I had because I was able to say, like, I've actually taken on a much bigger project than this.
Right.
And let me tell you how it went.
Yeah.
So, but that was an interesting thing, just trying to understand people's perspectives. Because I think some of my early clients, I maybe came off as a little passive because I was like, oh, yeah, this is no big deal. When for them, it was a big deal.
Right. It is an interesting thing because people put emphasis on different things and they hold higher regards to different aspects of the house.
Yep.
In some areas, roofs are extremely important and really expensive.
Yeah.
And it's imperative that they have a nice roof before they move into the house. We're here in Colorado, we're like, it'll hail in the next couple months. Like, just wait till then, and insurance will pay for it, and you'll pay $1,000 for whatever your deductible is, right? Yeah. And so I bet that is true, where you were not worried about so many things, and other people, it was just a really big deal for them, and you were confused as to why that was such a big deal.
Yeah, that was a learning curve navigating, like, okay, what is my client going to think a big deal?
Right.
Versus what I think a big deal, because I don't think this is a big deal.
Yeah. And how do you set the expectation before letting them know that this could pop up, but it's actually not a big deal, and here's why, you know?
Yeah, I think that was a big thing. And then also just realizing on the retail side that I really needed to explain things well, because that was my other thing. I think I was so used to it from a client perspective. Okay, we're going to go under contract, get our earnest money turned in a few days later, get an inspection set up, we'll negotiate that. Appraiser's going to come. Like, I just knew all of this. And a lot of times, like, a client would, I'd be like, okay, earnest money is due this date. And they're like, what's that?
Yeah.
And so just realizing, like, people don't understand the home process.
Oh, not at all. People will go all the way through, close on a home, and still not know the process. Yeah. And I say that very clear. I mean, some of my best friends, we close the house that I close on tomorrow, Thursday, whatever day it is, on Thursday. And I guarantee you, if I were to ask them what XYZ is, even though I've explained it 100 times, they'll have no idea.
Yep.
For example, we got a new sewer. We had to get a brand new sewer for them. They keep texting me and asking me, how's the pipe going? I'm like, oh, it's not just a pipe. It's a sewer. It's a sewer line. It's a much bigger deal. It holds different things than a normal pipe. It's not just like pipe to your garbage disposal or whatever. So it is funny how much people don't know.
Yeah.
And if you've never been around it, I mean, so many people their families have never owned a home before.
Yeah.
And we don't really think about it like that, but it happens. Okay, so what would you say if you were to tell people, hey, don't do what I did? What would that be?
Don't sell your property and pay a bunch of taxes on it.
Yes, classic.
I mean, that would be the number one. Just, again, that snowball effect. You look back and just we could have deployed all that money.
Yeah.
Like, it'd be a game changer.
Sure, for sure.
So I think that would be, looking back, telling somebody else that, especially somebody that's already an investor, like, don't cash out and pay a bunch of taxes, 1031 to a larger property.
Sure.
That'd be the biggest thing I would hammer, because that tax bill was painful.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also, don't use TurboTax for stuff like that.
Oh, that's a good bit of advice.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Get a CPA, a good one,
Mm-hmm.
a real estate investing CPA.
Yeah.
Because they know.
So, and I have a big story about that, but I'll save that because we'll do a tax episode soon.
Absolutely. We might even bring somebody in for that. First of all, thank you for sharing your story. Thanks for going deep and letting us, talk real numbers, because I feel like so many people don't like speaking real numbers just because either they feel uncomfortable, they think it's tacky, maybe they feel like it's braggy, So I appreciate that honesty and transparency. What's next for you guys?
Yeah, so we are continuing to grow our portfolio. Our goal is to hit 100 units, 100 doors. And at that point, then we're going to start branching out. We're not super far away from that now. We should hit that probably sometime early next year, if I had to guess. And then we're going to start branching out into short-term rentals. So that'll be our next growth of our portfolio, is buying some short-term rentals in really kind of key markets and seeing how those perform. Because at that point, we'll have a really good base with our long-term, traditional rental units.
Yeah.
And so we can experiment, and if it goes a little wrong and, doesn't work out, like, we have a cushion there. So
absolutely.
I'm really excited to see how that goes. I have a couple friends that have gotten into the short-term game, and I'm a little jealous because it's a, new frontier that you get to learn and figure out.
It's a little bit sexier side of real estate.
Definitely
as well.
sexier, for sure.
Yes. We do not do sexy real estate, but
No.
that's okay. Our people make money.
Yeah.
They make money, so that's all that matters.
So I'm excited about that. It's going to be a
Yeah.
new thing to learn. And then also, back in college, I toyed around with the idea of being an interior designer. That was one of my original kind of career paths I looked at.
Yeah.
So getting to exercise that a little bit by designing and building out the interior of short terms, I think it's gonna be really fun.
It's gonna be a lot of fun.
Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to what the next few years holds.
Of course. Well, we can't wait to watch you go through it and learn from your mistakes, your triumphs, everything in between. You'll have to keep us posted on every property that you buy and sell, and we'll just talk through every single one as you go through it.
And if you want to stay up to date, check out our next episodes and subscribe to the podcast.
Thanks, guys.